we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today, P3s and P4s. I'm so glad that you can join the conversation. We did this presentation last year, and it brought up some wonderful conversation. And we actually, Tom helped one of our students with the process because he was just going through salary negotiations. So I'm hopeful that the conversation today will help you in your future endeavors. Quick introductions. You guys know me. My name is Kayla Sanders. I'm the alumni manager for the college and also the Genesis Board liaison. We have Brandon Patterson. You want to wave, Brandon? There's Brandon. And we've got Shayla Morris and Tom Turong, who will be your presenters today. And then also on the call, we have another Genesis board member, Pamela Wiltfang, and she's not going to put on her camera because she just got back from vacation. So with that, Genesis board members, please take it away.
Awesome. I think it'd be great if we can just give everyone a minute to do this. It's slido.com, and when you guys get on there, you just enter the code there, 3064771, or you can scan the QR code because we wanted this to be a little interactive, at least to generate a little bit of dialogue. So there'll be some questions and ratings on just how you guys feel about the negotiation process, and then we can kind of tailor our discussion around how everyone feels and what the room is kind of reading towards us. So the other part on there too is that on Slido you'll have a Q&A tab as well. And I believe it's anonymous. I'm almost positive it's anonymous. So please feel free to put any questions in there, and then we can answer them at the end as well. So, all right. Okay, so difficult conversations, best practices for salary negotiations. So what we'll talk about today is the what, why, how the process kind of starts and ends with the salary negotiations, the thought process for both the employer and you yourself while going through the negotiation process, and the do's and don'ts, and I think Shayla and Brandon will talk a little bit more about this. So there's no right or wrong way to do a negotiation process. This is based on just a little bit of reading experience. And then at the end, we'll have some open discussion. And again, please feel free. I'm monitoring the Q&A as well, so I can see them as they come in. We'll save those for the end. So like Kayla said, I'm Tom Trung. I graduated from the College of Pharmacy in 2014. Shortly after, I was floating at the Walgreens district in this area between here, the corridor up north to Waterloo and Cedar Falls. Then I was a staff pharmacist and then a pharmacy manager at the Walgreens in North Liberty. And then shortly after that, I was a specialty pharmacy manager in Iowa City on Riverside Drive, which some of you may have seen or experienced before. And most recently, now I'm a medical science liaison for Bristol Myers Squibb in their hematology oncology division doing myeloid malignancies. Okay, so the first question in this poll is how would you or do you feel during a negotiation process? So I'll give everyone a little bit of time here. We've got 4 responders. There's probably 1 or 2 more. Okay, so we got 7, so that's great. I think that's probably right. Okay, so I rated it from 0 for just being like, thank you for just giving me a job. I'll take whatever you'll give me, to show me the money, being like ultra confident. And honestly, this is probably it says it's a score of 2.1 all the way up to 7 here. So 43% of you, most of you guys put a 2. I would say that's probably pretty typical of anyone going through their first salary negotiation. I think as you go through more career opportunities and as you go through your career path, you'll get more opportunities to negotiate your salary. So you'll get a little bit more comfortable through this whole process. I'm a big fan of memes. So there'll be a couple of memes and pictures throughout this whole presentation. But this is the panic button and the don't press the panic button. So it kind of puts you in a dilemma. And I'll tell you, when I started this process, even with my first job offer, I was in the same boat as I'm just happy to have a job. And as I've grown through 3 or 4 different roles now, I've gotten more comfortable with knowing what my worth and my value is and what I can give to the company. All right, so what, why, and how? So what is where we start, right? So congratulations, you just got a job offer, whether it be a residency, a community opportunity, a fellowship opportunity. So congratulations, right? So you've got your job offer, and then now what? So why are we here? What are we talking about? So you're doing this for yourself, and one of the most interesting things I heard in the last 2 or 3 years from a pharmacist who's now become really a close friend, that's become a speaker for Bristol Myers Squibb. And she was going through the salary, or not salary negotiations, but negotiation process for being a paid speaker for us. And there's a tiering system with paid speakers for industry companies. So the highest paid speaker is usually an MD or a DO, right? And then you have your second tier with the advanced practice providers like PAs, NPs, and pharmacists. And so it was interesting, her mindset and her approach to going through the negotiation process, because they gave her an offer. And at that point, she had spoken for 2 or 3 different companies before. So she had gotten used to going through this whole process. There was a little bit of back and forth, and I asked her, what her thought process was throughout this whole thing. And I just kind of want to highlight the for the people who come after you part. I think that's the most important thing, right? Because you kind of want to set the standard. And so she said, I want to do this because I'm representing a profession, and pharmacists should be valued as much as any other advanced practice provider, NPs, PAs. So she felt like she had to bring it to the table and say, this is what we're worth. Please don't, insult me in lack of a better phrase. I'm sure she didn't say that. But yes, you're doing this for yourself, right? You're setting yourself up for the now, and then even retirement benefits, paid time off, further down the road, so you know where you're kind of lying when you're looking ahead for more opportunities. And so so how do we negotiate? And I put a good luck there because there's so many different ways to approach this process. So there's a couple things to consider. Is this a dream job, or do you see yourself leaving in 5 years? I think there's a dilemma when you get that offer. And I mean, your first job is almost like a dream job, right? Because you're just happy to get a job, especially because of the market sometimes that we may be in. So I graduated in 2014 from the College of Pharmacy. And at that point, I was happy with a job because I think this district, for at least Walgreens, only took 3 of us out of our class. So I was just happy to have a job. The market was bad. The market was oversaturated. I didn't know if it was my dream job. I didn't see myself leaving in 5 years. I, at that point, didn't negotiate. I probably didn't have room to negotiate because there was an oversaturation of pharmacists. So you have to consider that. So will this be a win for you and a win for them? So what kind of value are you adding to the company that you're going to be working for? They obviously like you, but do they like you enough? Or do they think that you were truly the best candidate, or do they think that they were settling for you? So something to think about there. I already talked about it, but what type of market are we in? I think now is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, P4s and anyone else, but I think now is probably a good time to be in the market. I think coming out of COVID, there was a lot of burnout. And so the opportunities are right for the taking. You can negotiate a lot of different things. And even in the community setting, negotiating if you work 1 out of every 4 weekends rather than every other weekend, or how many nights you can work during the week. So there's a lot of different things that Shayla and Brandon will talk about. And again, as a new grad, just think about what you bring to the table. You may think that you don't bring any experience, but you're coming off of rotations and you're learning everything that's new and up to date. So that is bringing some sort of value to people who may not be well versed in something as simple as, I shouldn't say something as simple because it's complicated, but something as simple as PBM reform, right? You're coming off of rotation, having experienced what is at the forefront of every pharmacist and every business's mind. So that is something that you're bringing to them. Um, I just wanted to talk a little bit about due diligence as well. Use as many resources as possible to gauge where you should start your salary discussions. So there's some clear ones like BLS.gov, which is like what I used in high school, state databases, just to kind of understand what the regional trends look like. LinkedIn, some states require, Brandon just told me this just recently, some states require salary ranges now. And so when you're looking on LinkedIn, depending on the state that you're in, they will list those salary ranges. And there may be some nuances to that too. That's just starting salary. So you could be at the lower end or the higher end, but it's also based on your experience as well. I'm a big Reddit person. I before I took this opportunity as an MSL, I was on Reddit all day, every day, just to understand what the trends are, what people are negotiating, and through that, I found the MSL Society, which had a great survey that they do every year to kind of have a distribution of where salaries lie based on therapeutic area, your region, your years of service, your expertise. If you're a PharmD or a PA or an NP, there's a lot of different categories that they list into. So it kind of gave me a better idea to where to start as well. So really, I just want to end with this Drake part because I just absolutely love this beat. But please, absolutely know yourself, know your worth. I said that at the beginning. And this, I think I'm going to pass on to, is it Shayla or Brandon?
I think it's me. I'll be jumping into the process slides, but before we do it, let's go ahead and do another Slido question. This one's a little bit easy. You only have two choices, and there's no right or wrong answer, as you'll find out when we talk about it. But who would you prefer start with an initial offer, you or the employer? And let's see what we got here.
We're waiting for one more. Oh, nope. Oh, now we've got eight respondents, so that's good. All right, so we've got eight.
Let's see, employer. Okay, and then I was the only one that voted for me. Yeah. Okay.
Brandon, I didn't vote either, but
No, no.
I would also vote me. I'll put that in
That's
there.
okay. And I think we can think about it a few different ways. But let's talk about the process more holistically with the next slide, Tom. And let's see. Start off with a brief career journey. I've been out of pharmacy school for a while now. So I got my PharmD at the University of Texas back in '08. And then my Iowa connection is going back into the socioeconomic program there. I think it's called HSR now, and got my PhD in 2013. Was an assistant professor. So that was my first round of negotiation. And I think similar to Tom, I was like, I don't really have any negotiating power per se. I was just looking for a job and on the East Coast because my wife wanted to work for the pharmaceutical industry when she got right out of school. So I knew I had to go to the East Coast. So AACP is one of those great resources that you can use if you're going to be on faculty to look at faculty salaries, and they do a decent job of breaking it down by type of school, type of role, type of department, and things like that. So if you are interested in an academic role after school, obviously there's probably some other additional training you'll have to do, either residency and or fellowship grad school sorts of trainings. But there's an organization, as Tom alluded to, that you can tap into to see what salary ranges are for those types of opportunities. After that, I decided to go into the pharmaceutical industry, and I've been through a couple of companies now, GSK, where I started out on their health outcomes and epidemiology group, working for vaccines and doing a lot of the health economic modeling for Shingrix when that product was vetted by the CDC, both for their original indication and then their immunocompromised complication indication that came out a little bit later on. And then when COVID hit, GSK made a slightly different decision about how they would approach the COVID vaccine, and I wanted to work on it, which meant I had to move to a different company, and that's when I left the J&J and was their compound market access leader globally for that COVID vaccine. And since then, the market's changed. I'm now out of a job. I'm not sure if anyone heard that at the front, but part of what was in my package when I signed on to J&J was this idea of severance and things like that. Which if you get let go of a company, sometimes they can pay for you for a brief period of time or 6 months or whatever, and there's certain benefits that you get if you're fired versus you're just kind of redundant because they decided to not sell the vaccine. So that's kind of where I am in J&J. So this is front of mind, the application process. And to me, that's where job negotiations really begin, is understanding what Tom was alluding to early on, and that is your value, and being able to put into very clear terms what your value is to that opportunity that you are seeking, or many opportunities, depending on how you're approaching your job hunt. So next slide, Tom. So it all starts at the beginning, right? So when I think about going into a negotiation, I'm trying to understand what my value is that I'm bringing to the table. I'm also best trying to understand what is it that that organization needs in their organization to have value for them. Because at the end of the day, where you have the most value on the table to negotiate with is when everybody has a clear understanding of what they need and what you offer and how those kind of complement one another. And then you can have a little dance per se. So do your due diligence. Look at your resources. I always never hesitate to ask people what are salary ranges if you're going into a particular company or a particular region. I think this is a very important too. And I've mentored a number of folks that have gone through internships in industry and other things in grad school. Especially when you feel like you're being disadvantaged, right? The worst thing that you want to go in is any disadvantaged type of group for any reason, is to not understand what a high salary is for an opportunity. Because the one thing that you're going to have to get comfortable with is asking for the value that you expect to receive, regardless of all the other things that you think are, not stacking up in your favor, right? Okay, so you've got to have a grasp of what you bring to the table and what that could mean for the company based upon norms and whatnot. And that's only assessed through due diligence. So it could be global, it could be countrywide, it could be Reddit, but then you always have to think back, how am I going to localize that value for this particular opportunity? So that happens before you apply. Now, where it gets tricky, right? Who starts the negotiation? Well, if a company puts a range on LinkedIn, they've already started the negotiation, right? So I don't discount people for saying, oh, the company should go first. I like hearing ranges from companies too, because that kind of tells me where my boundary conditions are for that particular role, and depending on what my needs are for my particular context. Because remember, you're no longer making decisions for yourself, you're making decisions for your context, right? Maybe you're trying to help out your community. Maybe you're trying to help out your family. Maybe you're trying to think about living in a new area. All of those things are going to be affected by this job that you're going to be working in for the next given period of time. So all of that has to be at the forefront of your mind as you're thinking about going into these expectations. So salary can be posted for some job descriptions, or it can be expected and inferred through your due diligence activities. But don't stop with the salary. Keep in mind, salary is one component of a package, right? Not every employer is going to be able to give you $1 million. Okay, they just can't do that. Everybody would want it, but that's not how it works. So in order to make sure that you have a comfortable living, they give you other things, right? Medical benefits, stock options for certain companies, bonuses, sign-on bonuses, relocation packages, paid time off, maternity leave, remote types of positions when it's not posted in the job description as being a remote. All of those things are on the table in terms of a total package, that you could be negotiating, depending on what the typical parameters are in a given industry about which components are more negotiable or not. Things like salary are probably the most negotiable because that's a number that they can kick around with and move some Excel sheets, to kind of balance out at the end of the day. But all the other things are negotiable within reason. Um, if there's certain norms for a company, they'll just say, look, we can't negotiate on that. This is how it is. Or they'll give you a brochure ahead of time, which is something that you can ask for that describes the benefit package in its entirety, in addition to the salary that a company may offer. So when I'm thinking about doing a screener interview, which is typically done with an HR person and not necessarily the hiring manager who you're going to be reporting to, you can ask a lot more questions because you're trying to get, they might ask you, what's your salary expectations? How would you approach it? I tend to approach it from a range perspective if they didn't give me a range. That way, you at least have some wiggle room where you can showcase what your value is to the table that you think will get you higher up on that range ladder. And they can think about, does your range fit within their things of salary provisions that they want to offer you for that particular role? And then that way it's decided, at least up front, whether this is something that you want to keep moving forward to. Because I think something that people forget about is that these job interviews take time, right? There's an opportunity cost. That's the economist coming out of me. You can't just apply for hundreds of jobs and interview for all of them. So you've got to put some finite reasons on, these are the jobs I want to apply for based upon the criteria that are most value to me: location, salary, type of job description, role. Now, job descriptions are very vague. Job descriptions are meant to be kind of standardized across a whole gradient across a corporation. So generally what I focus on during the main interview, which is typically with a hiring manager, or it could be with lots of other people and the hiring manager, I try to figure out exactly what is the job that I'm going into, right? Because that they're not hiring somebody to do everything in the job description or expecting you to do everything in the job description as it's written. You're going to be doing very specific things on a day to day, or you're going to be expected to serve different types of functions on a day to day, or you're going to meet certain KPIs or certain metrics. Ask that. Ask that during the interview, because that's going to give you leverage on understanding how you fit best into that role. Remember, you're trying to figure out exactly what is the job that I'm applying for, and then how does my skills and experience set match up to that? As you're thinking about your first pharmacy opportunity, maybe you had experiences and practice settings that are highly relevant to that population of interest. Maybe you have a lot of soft skills that you've developed through leadership and professional associations, and they're really needing that skill set, but it's not really highlighted on the job description. You're only going to know that type of thing through dialogue with the hiring manager or other members of that team. And that's where you get to find little nuggets of information that could be useful as you approach a negotiation of salary, because then you're able to tie your specific skills and experiences in the past to what they need. And that's when you're going to have the most opportunity to say, this is why I'm asking for a particular salary. So with the hiring manager itself, some companies, so this is the process in general, but it could be very different at some companies. I've never negotiated my salary with the hiring manager. But that might just be the industries that I'm in, but they don't negotiate salary, right? They're all about finding the person they want in the job, and then they work with their boss to figure out how much money they can allocate to you when you start negotiating with the HR person about specific things that you would like to see in that particular package. So that's where I think the rubber meets the road more often than not. And that really doesn't happen until Tom alluded to, you get an offer, which is a great position for you, right? Because now this is really the most powerful moment in the salary negotiation process, right? Because now you know something. They want you, and they've selected you, and they've not selected other people. And for them to go back and get those people that they have not selected it's going to take a hell of a lot of effort. So you kind of got some value just built up in the process that you're now on top. And now you got to start thinking about, okay, when I get this offer, I'm going to read through it. Can I take time to review it? Absolutely. That should be given to you. And if they don't give it to you, at least ask for them. Can it be emailed? Should be emailed. And they'll tell you some things verbally. It's kind of like, don't commit. Don't say yes. Say, hey, I'm interested. I'm really excited. Convey that enthusiasm. But I'd like to see things in writing so I have some time to kind of think through about how it matches up to my context. Now, what could be going on in the background? Maybe you got a second offer. Maybe you got a different type of interview happening next week. So they don't know that information, right? This is part of the asynchronous negotiation thing. You've got things going on, they've got things going on. The only thing they've revealed to you when you got the offer is they've still got other people they've interviewed that they haven't told they haven't got the job yet. But they've told you they want you in that job. So you're not going to get a lot of time to review these offers. So you're going to have to do your work quickly. Hopefully, you've lined up your due diligence. And then after you review it, set up a time. Say, here's the things that I appreciate in the job offer. Here's some things where I'd like to ask um, for a little more discussion. And it could be the salary. And you can say, look, I think the salary is fantastic. But here's something that I found out during the course of my interview for. And here's why I think I need this number. Or let's say this is your second job. You can say, well, I'm currently making X and, I'm getting information for this. And if I were to take on supervisory roles, then I would expect X much. See, so the process of negotiation itself is when you're talking about value, it's all about blocks of people and blocks of information. They know they want you in that role. So they're going to give you what they think can get you into that role. It doesn't mean they expect that to be the end point. But what they don't expect is to give you anything more unless you can demonstrate why you need it. And it can't just be, I need it. Because we all need more. You got to give them some evidence about why you need it. Hey, I think this job is great, but this isn't Timbuktu, Iowa, or Sheridan, or wherever it was. That's the pearl of the Midwest. This is Iowa City, so we got to do a little cost of living adjustment here. All of those things work into your favor, but you have to have a little story behind it. So I'm going to stop there. That's just the ins and outs of it, and I'll be happy to answer more questions during our Q&A. And here's the meme that Tom picked for this one. My interpretation of this is if your house is on fire, don't say it's fine. If you cannot live with that offer, there's really two things that you can do. You can negotiate it up or you can walk away. Don't lock yourself into something that's terrible. Because that's something that does anybody remember Dr. Sarafin? Dr. Sarafin gave me that advice. He says, don't take a job you don't want, right? Don't, and that includes the offer about what you're going to get for it, because then you're stuck in it. And that could be you're sticking yourself in your own hell. So two options: walk away, negotiate it to make it better for you. Talk more later.
Okay, and then we'll get into the last Slido question before talking more about specifics of negotiations. And Brandon, you really teed it up for me, so thank you for that. So question, what would be most important to you during a negotiation?
And just a reminder too, the Q&A, we actually have like 3 or 4 questions of the Q&A. So please remember, if you've got anything, put it in there. And Sheila, I'll vote for this one.
Okay, perfect. All right, I think we've got maybe 1 or 2 more people.
Yep, there we go.
All right, so it looks like number one is benefits, so PTO, insurance, hybrid work, things like that. Number two is salary. So it's actually very interesting that's number two. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then bonus and incentives, so CE stipends, and then number four, your title. So that's pretty interesting. Next slide. So here's my career journey so far. So I'm a 2016 grad from Iowa, and then I actually did the PGY1 community pharmacy residency. After that, my first job was in academia, similar to Brandon. So that was down in New Orleans at Xavier University of Louisiana College of Pharmacy. I actually remember the day that they called me and said I got the job, and I was on a 0 of comfort level for negotiating. So I'm pretty sure I just said yes right away. And I think the chair was even like, "Are you sure? You can take some time to think about it." And I was like, "Nope, nope. I'm perfectly fine. I'll accept the job." And then probably about 10 minutes later, I was like, I should have negotiated something. So I'll really talk about some of my anecdotal experience, but I definitely started getting more comfortable as I went through my different positions. I did that for about 2.5 years. And then in January of 2020, I switched to Oster Health as a clinical pharmacist in their digital medicine department. And so I was pretty lucky. Digital medicine, we all know what happened in March of 2020. So I was able to actually go fully remote in mid-March and then stayed that way for the next 2 years. And during that time, I actually moved back home to Iowa. And then I took a position at Broadmont's Medical Center as their clinical pharmacy coordinator. So I've been doing that since about April of 2022. And so, like I said, I'll kind of walk through different things that I've experienced as we look at the nitpicky things about negotiations. So next slide, please. So just like Brandon mentioned, it's truly a package and not just a number. It always starts out like that, but don't be like me and just take that first number right away, or even just say yes right away and hang up. Because once that conversation is ended, you really close the door on any of the power that you have, like Brandon was talking about. And just like he mentioned before, you don't have to even answer the next day or so. You can say, "Can I get back to you, by the end of this week?" Or I've even asked before, "When would you like a final answer?" And so that kind of gives you a little bit more leeway to truly take the time and kind of sit on things that are important to you. So sometimes salary can be adjusted and sometimes it cannot. For the second job at Oshner that I took, I did negotiate my salary up a bit. I think they said yes right away. And so I was like, shoot, I probably should have asked for a little bit more. So that kind of it gave me a little bit more confidence when I was going into the negotiations at Broadlawns. And so, funny story, I know that Tom and Brandon, you both kind of shook your heads where you're like, "Oh, I don't really negotiate with the hiring manager." I actually did for my most recent job. So when I got the job offer with the salary, it wasn't too far off of what I was going to get with my next pay raise. And so I countered with a number, and they actually told me no, that was the highest that they could go or that had been approved. And I knew that it wasn't equal to what was necessary for the role because I had done my due diligence. And so I actually went back to the hiring manager and asked if I could speak to him. And we had a phone conversation. He explained why, that number was what it was. And then I kind of sat back and I was like, I think we can maybe push this a little bit more. And I think it's a little bit easier to do that when you're comfortable. I already had a job, so I wasn't necessarily needing to get a new one right away. So that might not always be something that you can do for your first offer, or if you need to, get a job or move to a different location. But if you're able to take that time and opportunity to do so, I would suggest it because you don't want to lower your own value when you know that you might be worth a little bit more. So I actually wrote out an email and kind of explained my reasoning of why it needed to be this higher number, and threw in a CE stipend for myself as well. And so then they actually took that. So I love that Brandon mentioned, get it in writing, get it in emails, because that actually helped me for the next year when they were readjusting the budget for the department and they needed proof that I was allotted a CE stipend because it technically wasn't in my contract. But because I had that negotiation in writing, we were able to include it. And so I still get to have that continuously each year. So that's just one example. But say that your salary can't be adjusted, or you want to get a little bit more out of that package so you fully feel comfortable. I've kind of divided these into different categories. So you want to think about your time. What is your start date going to be? It doesn't necessarily have to be in 2 weeks. And I would even say, if you're able, give yourself a little bit of a break. In my experience, when I took the Broadband's job, I actually pushed it out about 3 months. So I got the job in January, but I requested to start in April. So there was a couple of reasons. One, I'm in Iowa, so I did not want to start having to drive out of my house every day in the wintertime. But then two, I wanted to finish up some things and projects that I had going on at Ochsner. And so my hiring manager actually said that he appreciated that, because it showed I was a person that didn't just drop what I was doing or, leave my team behind, even though I was moving on to a different position. So I think the way that you phrase things as well, definitely makes a big difference. And then along with start date, if you already have events planned, a vacation, a trip, a presentation, anything like that, mention that up front. Sometimes they can work that in with your PTO. Maybe they, will allow you that time off. Sometimes there's a 90-day or 6-month probation period where you may not be able to take any PTO. But if they know about that already, then you can work that into the negotiation. And then hybrid or remote work as well. If not every single job can do that, but if you're able to, and it's not initially in the job description, you might be able to convince them to give you a couple of days, or even a period of time where you're doing remote. And then in the next section, so benefits, which is very important to this group, vacation and PTO is something that sometimes can be negotiated, but a lot of times it may be standard, depending on your pay grade, or it's just a company-wide, you get X amount of days, but it's always worth it to ask. And then, like I said before, if you already know that you have things coming up, even if it's within the first few months of your job, just mentioning it at the beginning can allow them to let you go ahead and get that time off if needed. Sometimes you're able to negotiate your 401k or your vesting period. Some companies, you're vested from day one. And if you don't know what that means, it means whatever money you put into your 401k and that the company has put in to match you, or whatever their structure looks like, it's truly yours. My current job, their vesting period is a lot longer. It's a few years. And so again, that may or may not be something you're able to negotiate, but it's always worth asking the question to see what options there are. And then bonuses. So whether that's a sign-on bonus based on commission or metrics, or just something that happens on an annual basis, you may be able to negotiate those things on the front end. And then lastly, different incentives. So I mentioned how I was able to put in paid CE on an annual basis for my job, but that could also include reimbursements for professional development, or paid conferences. And if you're going down the conference route, I would also make sure to ask, is it just registration, or is it also travel, hotel stay, Ubers, or per diems for food? So try to think about all the different things that you might need to get paid for. So that way you can ask if it's reimbursed or paid up on the front end as well. And that'll help you decide, is this something that I'm allotted, or is it something that I can add into my contract? And then again, just giving those reasonings. If research is something that you're interested in, or that you may have students or anything like that, just kind of explaining that will help further that negotiation process. And again, discussing it all simultaneously and not serially makes your case a lot stronger. And it'll also show why they should be lucky to have you as an employee. So next slide, please. And then we just want to summarize some do's and don'ts that Tom, Brandon, and I have talked about today. So when you're getting your job offer, definitely be thankful and humble. I appreciate this. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to think about it. And then again, have realistic expectations. I've definitely, on the other side of hiring people, seen some salaries that were very high and didn't make sense. One person actually applied, and in the line where it says, "What is your expected salary?" it was something more than I made. So you need to be realistic, but then also know your market. And that goes back into that due diligence. You want to make sure that you're confident when asking for these things, because even if you're very nervous, they don't know that. all they hear is the confidence in your voice, and the reasons why you should have this job with all of the perks, salary, and incentives that they're offering. So just let them know that you know your worth. And it's also okay to have a bottom line number. So to me, that's something that you don't want to accept. So again, with this past position, the initial salary that they offered me, it just didn't make sense for me having to travel. I was using gas. I mean, I was working from home. So let's be honest, I was in my pajamas a lot or something comfortable. So now if I'm having to go back out into the world and represent my company and our department, there's just added costs with that. So it's okay to say no, and it's okay to explain to them why as well. And then phrase of the day, due diligence. So make sure you are having that background understanding so that you can project that confidence. A couple of things to not do. Don't be aggressive. You don't want to just come out the gate swinging because that can honestly turn off a lot of hiring managers and HR representatives. And I will say too that having heard, from our HR department, they do come back and talk to us and say, oh, this person, they didn't really like what we had to say or were very short. So that can be a reflection on you. I would not be the first person to bring a number. And I think that's something that we've talked about as well. Just because once you say that number, they can either say, yep, absolutely, we'll take it. And then you've lost your power. You want them to bring something to you so you can sit on it and think about if it makes the most sense for you. Don't over apologize. And so that's something that can be a little bit hard because I think as students and you're going into your first few positions, you just really want them to like you. You don't want to ruin per se any opportunities that you think that you're having, but you don't necessarily have to apologize. Remember that you're bringing something to the table. And so anything that you ask for, that's okay because you feel like it's your worth. And then accepting the first offer. Not 100% sure what the little asterisk is for, but it's probably because if you're excited and you do it, that's okay. But just try to calm down and remember that, hey, you've got a little bit of power there. And even if it ends up being that original offer, at least you put in the time to ask for the things that you feel like you deserve. All right, so I did add my email address on there, and Tom's is there as well. But I would love to hear from you guys about any questions that you have, anything about our previous experiences, or things that you might be worried about when trying to negotiate salaries.
Let's see if I don't know if oh, here we go.
Oh,
It did work.
perfect.
Okay, so what's this first one say? What do you say if the company, there we go. If you say if the company asks what salary we want. I don't know if Shayla or Brennan, you want to take this since you kind of just talked about this.
I've done a couple of answers. So when I first did the Oshner job, I actually said I want to be compensated similar to different pharmacists with my experience and my credentials. I did not want to give a number because I just thought they'd say, oh, perfect, we'll take that. And then with this last one, I offered like a range originally as well when I was talking about it. And then with the counter, I just put a blank number. I would say just doing your research in the market, especially in the region where you're located, is super important. And if you feel more comfortable giving a range, I think that's very appropriate too, instead of just a flat number.
Yeah, I agree. I gave a range. With these, I've been filling out a lot of applications online these days, and I can't think of a job that hasn't asked me salary expectations when I apply, which helps them screen too. Again, I'm kind of mid-career, so I have certain salary expectations. So they want to make sure that they're not going to waste their time if it's not fitting their needs. If they can't pay that much, then it behooves them not to hire you. So that's, it sounds like, oh, that might be a missed opportunity, but it just might not be the best fit for value.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what it was kind of funny that Brandon and I were really the only ones that said that we were comfortable with starting with the negotiation process, or at least bringing a number to the table. I think it's like for me, I'm comfortable with bringing a number to the table. just because if I was able to get that number, I would be happy with it, right? Like, and on the flip side, like Sheila said, well, you don't know what's on the other side, right? You could say something and then they could have that, 1.3 times what you were expecting, and then you've lost that point 0.3 just because you didn't allow them to start with it. But again, it's like what's your goal here? What's your level of happiness, right? Like if you've already hit that number, then you should be completely fine with yourself. But yeah, just like Brandon and Sheila said, it's a range. When I talked at the beginning, those ranges again are just a starting point. You can always exceed those. I had a teammate that just recently left the company for another company, and he told me that his starting salary was outside of the range that was posted. So again, I think it's just to reassure you that there are opportunities beyond that salary range. So all right, so I think that one's good. How can you determine if it's a win for them or understand how much they truly desire you? So I think this kind of starts with the interview process. And so I think back to my recent interview with my manager, and she was explaining almost verbatim what she wanted in her candidate. And I knew that for my team, the MSLs that were on my team are all PhDs and PharmDs. And the PharmDs came directly from floor practice in hematology specifically. And I only had experience in specialty pharmacy. And when she was talking to me during the screening call, she was describing the type of person she wanted. And this kind of leads into, interview practice sessions, right? You ask what type of person, what type of candidate are you looking for? And so I let her lead with, all of the traits that she was looking for. She was looking for someone not typically a non-typical MSL that would be coming from floor experience, someone that had a different experience that could bring to the team. So when you're hearing those keywords and triggers, then you kind of get an understanding of, well, this is exactly what she was looking for, and I fit exactly what she was describing. Yeah, that's what I have. Brandon and Shayla, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think that, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. The one thing that I kind of get tripped up on this question is the word desire. I think that's kind of there's emotions in that word. And really, at the end of the day, you have to think about this. This is a business, right? There's going to be facts. You're interested in the job. They're interested in filling the job. How y'all meet in the middle, that's what's going to secure them to move forward in hiring the next person they have to hire. So it's not really about desire, right? Especially when it comes to the HR folks, because their mission is to put person in role, and that's what their metrics are. So they're not desiring anybody other than a one instead of a zero in their spreadsheet. So what you have to think in terms of is value that you bring to the table and need that that team brings to the job opportunity that's in front of you. And that's in pharmaceutical terms, we call that value proposition versus value recognition. And what you want at the end of the day is for that value recognition to be mutually beneficial to you, right? You've got different experiences, skill sets, and opportunities. And the more you understand what the needs are, interview, job description, whatnot, and you match onto those needs and you communicate your value proposition to fill those needs, the more likely you are to get higher value recognized by that employer. So I just caution about thinking about this like desire. And the same can be said for firing. Nobody wanted to fire me at the end of the day. It has nothing to do with liking somebody, right? It's all about numbers at the end of the day. And as excited as these opportunities are and the differences you really get to make in the world, these are exercises in making sure they've got people in the role, and that's kind of what it boils down to. So try to separate that emotional kind of attachment to any of this, because it's really, that's where you get into some trouble. Emotions aren't what you negotiate on, facts are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Brandon, especially from the HR hiring side. they don't know 100% what is entailed in the role. That would be more for the hiring managers and the team. I would say from my experience, when you're speaking with the people that you'll actually be working with and directly for, if they're trying to sell you on the position versus you having to 100% explain why you're the best, that's when I think you can kind of tell it would be a win for them, or they would prefer for you to be in that role because of the experiences that you bring.
All right. How can you effectively negotiate and demonstrate your value to secure a higher salary within the upper range? So I think I just went through this one with my teammates. I just recently left. So we were hired. I'm a little bitter because his package is really good. We got hired about the same time and at BMS, and he recently just left. We were both first time MSLs, and he left BMS for a really good opportunity. And when you take a look at his body of work in just a year and a half, he's done a lot of things that what a senior MSL would have done already within the year and a half. So when you're negotiating, I'm assuming when he was negotiating with his new company, he had almost some sort of leverage to say he was already operating at a senior MSL level because he's done so many different things. And truthfully, he was and is just a machine of a person, but he deserved it, deservingly so, because he was able to check all those boxes. So this is a little bit difficult to apply this to the P4s that are here, because again, you feel like you're new and coming out and have no platform to stand on. But again, I think it's okay to leverage what you just had for your experiences. And it can also be research opportunities or working with some of your professors on projects. It shouldn't just be what you did for rotations as well. So.
I would even add in here too. I think this is really where confidence comes into play, because you have to know your value to demonstrate your value. So I think that when you're talking about your experiences during P4 year with working with research and all of that, being able to specifically apply it to the roles that or the jobs that you're applying for helps to demonstrate your value and can show why you may deserve a higher salary or a higher range than what they're initially offering. They can just look at it on a piece of paper, but you need to be able to explain the specific things that you're bringing to the table that warrant that higher salary.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is just make sure you know what range you're talking about, right? Because there's range that they may put in their job description, which Tom alluded to, they may actually be able to exceed because the salary band for that particular role and that rank in role in that organization is actually wider than the range they've published? Or is it your range where you're giving them some flexibility, but you're going to be able to demonstrate, like Shayla said, I have all of these experiences that get me to the upper end of my range. So just think about what range you're actually thinking about there. Because if it's the upper end of the salary band for the company, you're not going to get that until you have years of experience or opportunities. And it's that way because hopefully you get merit increases every year or at least every other year. So if you're at the upper end of that range, you're either promoted or you're never getting a salary increase. So you just have to think about what range you're actually talking about there.
I think we already talked about this one, that can you negotiate for things like additional PTO? And from my understanding, PTO is pretty standardized across industry. I don't know if I've heard of anyone being able to successfully negotiate PTO. Again, I think it's worth asking for, because you'll never get, I shouldn't say you'll never, but it's highly unlikely that they'll rescind an offer because you're asking for too much. Now you don't want to be aggressive. Again, like Shayla said, you want to remain respectful, and just have a good idea of what they can negotiate on. I do kind of want to go back to Shayla's poll, where the last place was negotiating a title, because I think this is important for long-term horizon. Titles aren't everything. I would totally be in that camp and agree with it. But I will say that if you can also negotiate a title, it could lead to other career opportunities. I think the thing, I mean, specific for me, again, speaking towards MSLs, MSLs and field directors and field medical directors are the same thing. But when someone sees that you're a director, you may have more opportunities given to you because you've got the word director in your title. So if you're looking for other opportunities to elevate yourself, you've got the title director in your name. Whereas the MSLs for BMS just say MSL, medical science liaison, which is totally fine. But I think that's another thing that you kind of want to put in there too, is that the title it can be important. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about this one is part of what you're negotiating is a complete package. So make sure you understand the full package. I know we've talked about a lot of different things, and Charlotte helped introduce more topics, but it can be even wider than that. Like, I mean, you think about MSLs and even headquarter-based staff in pharma, you're getting a cell phone or a cell phone allotment, a vehicle in some cases, or vehicle allotment, gas. You might get an exercise stipend that could be once a year or it could be quarterly. Yeah, there's all different things that could make that package less negotiable about the pieces, but in turn, those things make the salary pressure much less contentious, right? Because now you're not having to pay for gym membership, you're not having to pay for your cell phone bill. Maybe they give you lunch, whatever. But make sure you're understanding the full package, because you might be asking for a higher salary and they're like, why do you really need it? Because we're providing you all this extra stuff. So try to sync up on what the actual package is.
And one more thing, just to add on to that too, there is a number that you can attach to your benefits, like your actual medical, dental insurance, and retirement things and all that, depending on how much you pay. So, for example, at our institution, there's one flat fee for if you have your family, no matter how many family members are in there. And so when we just hired a pharmacist, she's getting less on the actual salary number. But then when she looked at her benefits and our retirement plan, which is IPER, so essentially a state pension, she realized that she was getting more in value with those benefits. So just another thing to consider.
So we had some late questions in here too. At what point in your careers would it be appropriate to request stock options? So I think this is highly variable, obviously, on the type of company that you work for. At Walgreens, that was, I mean, a non-negotiable, unless you got to a higher tier, middle management level or higher. Those opportunities would most likely be available, and they would probably offer those to you, so you wouldn't have to really negotiate that. In industry, it's a little bit different. I think stock options, long-term incentive options, retention bonuses, things like that are fairly standard, depending on the size of the company that you work for. So, I mean, I think in a larger company, it makes sense to ask for it. I think this is actually a good point too, because was talking with a couple of my teammates this past week, and it's actually okay to go back and revisit with your manager where you lie on your benefits package in terms of salary and everything as well. So if you're considering other options, you just have to weigh it out and have a good understanding of where you lie with your manager. But you can feel free to go back to your manager and say, I'm looking at different job opportunities. This is what I'm looking at in terms of what is out there, different experiences, different salary, things like that. And in my understanding is that those managers will have some leeway to work with you and say, we want to keep you. We don't want you to interview anywhere else. So let's try to figure out something to keep you here. So there's also a negotiation package at the beginning, or negotiations at the beginning, but also and throughout your career as well. So Brandon, Jayla, I don't know if you've got anything to add to this one.
I think it just opens up the idea that if you get stock or you get a bonus, it might actually behoove you to negotiate a higher salary, right? Because those things tend to be predicated on the salary itself, what percentage you get. So again, it goes back to, what do you value in this negotiation most to you? And if you're in a spot where a particular opportunity gives you something but it may not be negotiable, like the percentage of bonus or percentage of stock that you get. But the salary is negotiable. You might forgo other things in the negotiation just to focus on getting that salary as high as you can get it, knowing that your bonus and stock are going to be tied directly to that number. But this is why you have to do your due diligence and ask questions in the interview process.
I don't have any opinions on the concept of unlimited PTO. I think of my friends that maybe work at the university that have like unlimited childcare or sick leave. Like if, their child is sick and they have to stay home and have to miss work, it doesn't count as PTO. I think that's great. I mean, certainly it's up to the end user, right? I mean, sometimes people will abuse it, and then the goal of the company is to offer that unlimited PTO as a true benefit. And you hear stories on both spectrums. Some people don't take PTO at all, even if they're offered unlimited PTO, and some people take as much PTO as possible. So I don't have any opinions on it. In industry, I haven't really met anyone with unlimited PTO. But the people that I do know that have unlimited PTO don't abuse it. And I don't think it was a negotiable thing. I think it was just offered to them as a culture of the company, type of thing. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. My boss actually has unlimited PTO because he works for a different organization, but they have a few people within Broadlawns. His job is also one that he doesn't take a lot of PTO often because he's so frequently needed. And when he's needed right away, they need him. So I think it typically goes with some of those more high stress jobs, I would say. Again, he doesn't abuse it though either. I do know that if you do have an unlimited PTO, obviously, if you leave that job, your PTO doesn't get paid out. So that's just one thing to consider as well.
Good point. Awesome. We don't have any other questions. Does anyone have any questions or any dialogue that they want to share before we end this? Hopefully this was valuable to you guys. We tried to tailor it to, as you're graduating, what it looks like out there. So hopefully it was helpful. I know last year we were able to stay on afterwards and talk through some negotiations with the P4 last year. So I'll stay on. I don't know if Brandon, Shayla, you guys want to stay on, but if anyone else wants to stay on and discuss what they're personally going through, happy to discuss that too. But otherwise, thank you guys. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we've got a couple people.
I don't have any questions for you guys, but that was a really good presentation. Really was tailored. I I think I might have watched this one last year as
Yeah.
well. But this one I think was better. There were a couple more additions to it. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased.
I had Shayla and Brandon with me. I had to do this by myself last year. So.
It could be a recency thing too. Maybe you're in the thick of preparing, so it's more valuable now.
Right.
Thank you guys though. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Glad it was
Good
good.
luck.